Hello and welcome to yet another special programme. We are extremely lucky at Golden Days Radio to have a gentleman, Lewis Fiander, who's an actor, a stage, screen, TV, man of many parts, great interest. Welcome to Golden Days Radio, Lewis.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Well, it's wonderful, and you've had such a fantastic life, interesting life in theatre of all kinds. Tell us about it all.
Yes, I woke up, a couple of years ago and realised that the years were whizzing by, and it's going to be about 50 years shortly that I've been doing it.
Really?
I did start young, a child bride, you might say, but Melbourne born and in Kew, and brought up there. Went to school in Kew and sang in the church choir at Holy Trinity, which was really the trigger for the years to follow.
Really? Yes.
Yeah. And I loved the music, and we had a big choir in those days. There were about 24 boys and about 15 men. And then it got bigger as the boys didn't want to sing alto, and we had to bring in the girls, which we didn't like. We were really nasty little creatures, having sissies in the choir. But they became quite fun because we could do naughty things to them,
Yes.
And but it was great, and it was. We had a terrific choir master there called Cecil Trowbridge. We had two prior to that when I was very little, and they were quite nasty people, like those things you read in English novels. One of them used to take fence palings and beat us with them if we didn't sing properly. It was quite awful.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. I was
They'd
6
never
or
get away
7.
with it now.
No, of course not. But a man called Cecil Trowbridge appeared, who was a professional singing teacher, and he brought a lot of new things into the choir, Vaughan Williams and things like that, and I was fascinated by it. And I was a pretty good boy soprano. In fact, it was nearly a woman's voice, really, and they were looking for an actor in a place called the National Theatre, the Australian National Theatre movement, run by a great woman, former opera singer called Gertrude Johnson. And they had their little theatre at Eastern Hill, at St Peter's Hall there, and they did lots of plays. And they were looking for a young boy who perhaps knew the facts of life for what was considered in those days a rather naughty play by Emlyn Williams.
Yes.
And Welsh Emlyn Williams, who found Richard Burton, and so forth. And a man called George Morecambe in the choir thought that my performances in the chancel should be transferred to the theatre. And that's how it happened, because I wanted to be a doctor, really. And I did this play with a marvellous radio actor called Douglas Kelly. And then I thought that was it, and about 2.5 months later they phoned me up and said, we'd like you to be in The Merchant of Venice. So I went in to play Launcelot Gobbo, which I was studying at school and didn't understand what the hell Launcelot Gobbo was about. But it forced me to try and work out Shakespeare, and I did, and found that I could control school kids with a lot of comedy,
Right.
And so I just I was thrown in the deep end and came out swimming a bit like a champion.
And loving it?
Loving it, yeah.
So you got the bug had bitten by
well, I mean, there are a lot of wonderful people there, and Gertrude also got the first subsidy from the state government, from the state, to produce a festival of opera, ballet and drama at the Princess Theatre. And at that point, she had the most incredible collection of singers. It was, looking back at it now, it was one of the most extraordinary moments in Melbourne, Victorian, Australian operatic history. I love to mention their names, and I'm sure some of your listeners may remember them, but
sure
Marie Collier was there, and Betty Rector and Betty Fretwell, Loris Elms, Justine Rettick, John Shaw, Lance Ingram. I remember the day that Gertrude Johnson auditioned him as a young man, and she walked through this room floating about 3 inches perhaps above the ground. And someone said to her, "What's the matter, Miss Johnson?" And she just said, "I have found a tenor." And Lance, of course, went on to become the leading tenor at the Paris Opera. He changed his name to Albert Lance. But there was Neil Warren Smith and Len Delaney, who went on to become a great bass in Munich. They all went around the world and took their places, and there were other people about my age group, Gordon Wilcox and Greg Dempsey and things like that. And it was the most extraordinary cauldron to be thrown into. There was a young man working in the theatre called John Truscott, who went on to win 2 Academy Awards for his designs of Camelot. Yeah. The stage manager of my play was a man called Ray Lawler, who went on to write Summer of the 17th Doll. In the ballet, we had the ballet company as well, and there were new ballets being done, and great old character people like Shabelevsky and Eljaranov. And it was just an astonishing... I can't really speak very clearly about it because it's all sort of... Isn't that wonderful,
And it was all basically stirred up and made to happen by Gertrude Johnson.
Yeah. And I was doing Shakespeare and plays by Ibsen and doing stage management. And at one point I took over the publicity and was rather good at that. And it was the most wonderful springboard.
You were on a real roller coaster, weren't you?
In fact, I suppose there weren't any drama schools there at the time, but I probably learnt faster and more and had the chance to widen my vision than I might be in today's system of,
yes, I would think so. Yes, a little bit of everything.
Yeah,
doing all that.
Zoe Cordwell was there. Barry Humphries appeared there too. So it was unbelievable.
Wonderful. Now listen, we're going to listen to a bit of music, and it's going to be something that you love dearly. It's Dame Nellie Melba.
Yeah.
Recorded in 1927. Now, can you tell us how it was recorded? Because that'll be interesting.
Well, the thing is that those early recordings of Nellie Melba, I've never been able to work out why she was so great, the way that people have written things about it. But this is part of a collection which celebrated 100 years of HMV, and I bought it, and it's fascinating. But suddenly one day I was having a shower, and I put on, I don't know, I think it's 1918 to 1927 section. And I thought, who the hell is that singing? And truly, I got out of the shower, went downstairs, picked up the description, and went, oh my God, it's Melba. And this is a recording of her in 1927. The microphones must have been improved in those days, and perhaps in this case was just hung over the box at Covent Garden to record her last performance at Covent Garden. And she was 65 at this time, and for me, all the descriptions of this bell-like sound of Dame Nell's, here it is.
Right. can hardly believe that's a voice of a woman of 64, you said, I think. Was
65.
65,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. What a voice, yes. And lovely to be recorded live, to be able to hear people in the audience and so on. It's
Yes.
all these years later. It's
I think I said
extraordinary.
27, but in fact it was the 8th of June, 1926.
It's a good time ago, isn't it?
It is, but that's the lady that is quite rightly on our currency.
Yep.
Thank God it's the $100 note, the highest note.
Yes.
If it was $5, she'd be out of that grave in Lilydale, and
Yeah,
straight
quick as
to
a flash.
Canberra. You smash a few heads together, like her.
Let's continue with your story then. So you are now on a real roll.
Yeah,
You're in and out of all sorts of things.
I started to do a lot of plays there, and it was a sort of, one had to do a lot of things for free for
Yes.
Gertie. The idea of the National Theatre Movement was that it was going to be a living memorial to the veterans of the First World War, those who died in the First World War. And it didn't quite work out that way in the end, and although the theatre still exists, a theatre exists down in St Kilda, I don't know whether Gertie's vision was ever fulfilled, which is very sad. But when the Elizabethan Theatre Trust was formed many years later, the idea of that was Ben Chifley's idea. And I actually got this from Sir Lawrence Olivier. I mean, when I was in Olivier's company at the Old Vic years ago, he told me that Chifley had come to see him when he was out here at the Princess Theatre doing some plays with Vivian Leigh, and Chifley was very impressed with it and said, "How can I get a company like this?" And Olivier said, "Why?" He said, "Because I think it's good for the country." So Olivier suggested Dr. Tyrone Guthrie to come out, and Guthrie did come out, and he wasn't very impressed with what he saw in Australia and wrote a very bad report, and Chifley was not pleased with this. And he called a lady called Elsie Beyer, who was Chifley's company manager, to Canberra, and said, "Look, I don't want to be told that it can't be done. I want it done." And so the Elizabethan Theatre Trust was formed and took over most of Gertie's ideas. Unfortunately, Chifley died, and Menzies came in and got most of the kudos for it. But we do have so many things that have lasted thanks to the Elizabethan Theatre Trust. The Union Theatre Repertory Company was dying in sort of 1959, this wonderful professional company that John Sumner had started with Zoe Cordwell, and of course the Doll came out of that. And the Trust went in and saved it. And I joined them in 1959, which was make or break time, the university and the Elizabethan Theatre Trust. So the Union Theatre Rep became the Melbourne Theatre Company. So that's got quite a good history.
Yes.
Also the Australian Ballet, Borovansky, J.C. Williamson Ballet, the Trust came in on that, you know. So great things came out of it, and the Australian Opera is really an extension of the Elizabethan Opera.
That was a big move then, wasn't it, the Elizabethan Theatre Trust?
The formation of the Trust was very, very important, and we are very bad in Australia when we look back on our theatrical history, and there are people who denigrate the Trust. I've read recently some of the most appalling and ill-informed essays, call them what you will, about the Trust, and sometimes people just pick up on scandals or nasty things that people say and believe that it's truth in history without delving into it. The Trust also, when I joined them, I'm jumping a bit. I mean, after my days in the National Theatre in Melbourne, I decided the only way to become, decided I wanted to be a professional actor. And the only way to do that was to be in radio, if you wanted to be an Australian actor, because most of the commercial plays were based on imports from overseas, and you'd only got small parts, and I certainly didn't want to play small parts, you know. And having been doing a little bit of radio, thanks to Dorothy Crawford, Hector Crawford Productions, and Jean Lawson at 3DB, being in the Faker McGanges, which is anyone of my age group will remember the Fakers who listened to 3DB. I then packed my bags and went to Sydney, where radio was big business. And I fought my way and starved, certainly for a year, and learned to a wide variety of acting. I mean, I just couldn't play little kids and things like that, you know. I couldn't last on that. So you get funny old characters and things, my dear. And so you had to play all sorts of things, and playing things from Kid Grayson Wright's Arranged or Tarzan. And
Wonderful experience.
It was marvellous,
Wonderful.
yeah. And in fact, that was great schooling. Anyway, as I noticed that television was coming in and Sydney radio was dying, I threw everything up in the air and came back to the Melbourne Union Theatre Rep at John Sumner's invitation, and they had a contract for 7 months. And one of those plays was a play called Moby Dick Rehearsed, adapted for the stage by Orson Welles. Moby Dick in the theatre. Yeah. Frank Thring playing Captain Ahab. And it was a terrific production. And the Trust brought it to Sydney. So it was the first Australian company taken interstate by the Trust. There was this extraordinary...
Wow.
So much was going on within the Trust, thanks to this English director, Hugh Hunt, who had a fantastic vision. Australian writing, that Australian authors should be side by side with the great classic ones. So they were doing Shakespeare and they were doing Slaughter of St. Teresa's Day or Ned Kelly and Hamlet, and, very daring. So when I went to Sydney with the Trust, the Trust players had been formed, and I was asked to join them, and I did Eugene O'Neill's Our Wilderness, playing the young boy in it, and then a play by Brendan Behan called The Hostage, which at that time was pretty notorious, playing in London and Joan Littlewood's theatre, if that means anything to our listeners, and in New York, and I played Leslie in that, and we put it on for 4 weeks at the Elizabethan Theatre in Sydney, which was a 1,300-seater theatre, big theatre.
Good heavens, yes.
And we finished up playing 18 weeks, the capacity business.
How marvellous.
So a number of us were being promoted, Zoe Cordwell, Patricia Connolly, Neil Fitzpatrick and myself, and another young fellow coming behind us called John Bell.
Yes.
And then we were all eventually sent overseas for the purpose of widening our vision.
Right.
Not to be narrow-minded about Australia's the only place in the world where they do theatre. And so they sent a lot of us overseas, hoping that one day we would be coming back and forming the nucleus of a giant company of Australian stars, which alas didn't happen.
Wonderful thing to do. Can we have a little break now? We want to listen to something by Stephen Sondheim.
Yes.
Gods of the theatre, smile on us.
You who sit up there stern in judgment, smile on us. You who look down on actors,
And who doesn't? Bless this yearly festival and smile on us. We offer you song and dance.
we offer you rites and revels.
We offer you grace and beauty. Smile on us for this while. Gods of the theatre, smile on us.
You who sit out there stern in judgment, smile on us.
We offer you song and dance.
We offer you rites
We
and
offer you
revels.
gods
we
and
offer
heroes.
you jokes and
We offer you
insults.
pains and
we offer
pageants,
you bacchanals and social comment.
Bless our play and smile. Yes, but first, some do's and don'ts. Mostly don'ts. Please don't cough. It tends to throw the actors off. Have some respect for Aristophanes, and please don't cough. Please don't squeak. We haven't oiled the seats all week. You wouldn't want to miss a single word of Greek. It's hard enough for us to hear each other speak, so please don't squeak. If you see flaws, please, no loud guffaws, please, only because, please, there are politer ways. As for applause, please, when there's a pause, please, although we welcome praise, the echo sometimes lasts for days. Days. But first, don't take notes to show us all you know the famous quotes. And when you disapprove, don't clear your throats or throw your crumpled programs, coins, and coats, or tell your neighbors scintillating anecdotes. And please refrain from candy wrapped in cellophane. if we should get rhetorical, please don't curse. Wait till it's allegorical and in verse. If we should get satirical, don't take it wrong. And if by a sudden miracle a tune should appear that's lyrical, don't hum along. When we are waxing humorous, please don't wane. The jokes are obscure but numerous. We'll explain. When we are waxing serious, don't squirm or laugh. It starts when we act mysterious. And if you're in doubt, don't query us. I'll signal you when we're serious. It's in the second half. But first, please don't swim. The theater is a temple, not a gym. We may be in the middle of a sacred hymn, so please don't swim. Don't say what to every line you think you haven't got. And if you're in a snit because you've missed the plot, of which I must admit there's not an awful lot, still don't say what?
What?
Do not intrude, please, when someone's nude, please. She's there for mood, please, and mustn't be embraced if we are crude. Please don't sit and brood, please. Let's not be too straight-laced. The author's reputation isn't based on taste. So please don't fart. There's very little air and this is art. And should we get offensive, don't lose heart. Pretend it's just the playwright being smart. Eventually we'll get to the catharsis, then depart.
And now,
But first, we start.
Now, Lewis, that was from something called The Frogs.
Yes, not a bad opening. It's written by Stephen Sondheim and is one of his earlier works, which was written for the Yale School of Drama. And some of the obscure students at that time were Meryl Streep and Sigourney Weaver and the playwright Christopher Durang. And it's based on The Frogs by Aristophanes. And it's a marvellous piece, and it's never been done professionally, but this is the first time that they've brought a recording out with Nathan Lane in it, and there's another little piece too called Evening Primrose.
Oh, sounds lovely.
Yeah, and it's really delightful, but that opening to a show, I think, is great.
Yeah, great.
It says a lot about the theatre.
It does, doesn't it? Now, we've just travelled a long way with you, but not far enough. We're going to have to ask you to come back because we've just got, you're about to head overseas.
Yeah.
And I think that is another chapter.
In those days,
in
yes.
your life, yes.
Yes, they did an Australian
time.
play called The One Day of the Year, which was a big success about Anzac Day, and suddenly they called up and said they wanted me to go to London.
Wow. Well, now, will you come back again
I'd
and
love
talk
to,
some
yeah.
more? Because
Yeah.
I think we've got a lot more we want to hear from you.
Well, that's nice.
I'll
I'll do my best.
It's been absolutely wonderful, very exciting and
Thank
very
you.
interesting.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.